Hello and welcome to the Bitcoin Review podcast. The podcast where we fail at boringly reading the latest release notes and discuss project updates. This episode is not the list, and I'm actually super excited because, everybody loves to complain about Bitcoin UX. So I figure, hey, why don't I bring a bunch of UX Bitcoin people here and we hash it out and see we can come to some conclusions or some things that are interesting. So I will start with Stefan first. Stefan works for Spiral. So Stefan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Stephen DeLorme. I don't technically work for Spiral. I have a grant, and I'm a designer / front end developer. And right now, I work on the Bitcoin design guide and just kind of other projects that pop up in the Bitcoin design community. So if there's open source Bitcoin projects that need UX, UI help, I try to help out where I can. And then I'm also pretty active in the Atlanta community here, co-organize Atlanta BitDevs, and a place called Terminus Electric Money Laboratory, which is Atlanta's Bitcoin hackerspace.
Very cool. Are you familiar with Michael, who runs TabConf?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Mo, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Cool. Well, Stephen's a colleague of mine. We both work on a grant from Spiral as well. I'm the kind of UX researcher perspective. So my focus within the Bitcoin design community is on bringing a more UX research focus to the design and the development of all of these applications. Like Stephen, I work mostly on open source Bitcoin applications, having a lot of fun with it. And also similar to Stephen is I get to work on a bunch of different projects that go on at the same time within the community. So it's fun. Love what I do.
Very cool. Pedro.
Hey, everybody. Really happy to be here. I'm a designer or a Bitcoiner that used to be a designer and now trying to channel all my learnings from my previous fiat life into Bitcoin projects. And if they can be open source, even better. And just really happy to be participating in this thing and that it's fully open and trying to put myself into as many interesting projects as possible.
Cool. Matt, welcome back.
Hey guys, Matt Odell here.
I don't think you need to introduce yourself, do you?
I will introduce myself. I am the co-founder of OpenSats and the co-founder of Bitcoin Park, partner at 1031, Bitcoin-only venture fund. All three of those projects have a very strong design focus. We're trying to see better design in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And the listeners may know me as the co-host of bitcoin.review.
Matt also runs the best Twitter bot account, which is good morning, stack sats and stay humble, or stay humble and stack sats. I can never remember. And I'm in VK, I make stuff at CoinKite for a year or two. So guys, why don't we kick off from this? I think for as long as I've been in Bitcoin, I always hear somebody complaining, hey, Bitcoin UX sucks. Nobody's going to use Bitcoin. But on the other side, Bitcoin does seem to be winning. It's the currency, the cryptocurrency, between big quotes, who does have the most amount of users, does have rapid adoption, and it is finding its users. The users are finding Bitcoin and getting over the hurdles to do use it. So I'm curious on the sort of not the debate, but this dynamic of having. Of course, nothing is perfect. Of course, it can always be improved. But, it does seem to be doing well versus the amount of concern that people bring about its UX. So where do you guys sit on that dynamic? Do you want to start, Mo?
Yeah, on that dynamic, I think that one of the biggest things that I'm coming across in my research and what I'm noticing in all of the different open source projects that I'm working on is the applications have to build trust with the users, and different applications have different ways of building trust. There's a psychology behind building trust, and that's in the UI and the UX design. And there's an entire process of building trust, and that literally starts from the moment of onboarding. And every single wallet that I've been exposed to, they do it differently. But in terms of adoption, there's enough passionate people about Bitcoin that, are passionate about it. And so they will keep on using these applications. They'll keep on onboarding themselves. They'll keep on trying out different wallets. And so, yeah, that's why there is a user base, and it'll only continue to grow. Yeah.
I like to say that Bitcoin is not for everyone. It's available to everyone. It's people who need Bitcoin do find Bitcoin even through the hurdles. Back in the day, people would find Bitcoin through IRC. There was not even an exchange. You had to go meet the guy at the Starbucks, give him a pile of cash, and get your coins there. So we've come a bit of a long way, and it's a very interesting observation.
Let me just jump in real quick off of your comment. I mean, I think there's when we're getting started here, there's something I've noticed in the Bitcoin space. For us Bitcoiners that are active all the time, very enthusiastic about Bitcoin, building in the ecosystem, we tend to get pessimistic, disappointed with UX. But when you sit back and you look, you look at where we were 3 years ago, or where we were 5 years ago, or where we were 8 years ago, the change, even within open source projects, which historically have had worse UX than their proprietary counterparts, we've made massive improvements. I mean, I remember when I first created my first cold storage wallet, I set up a Linux computer and I set up a printer, and I printed out the private keys, and then I just destroyed everything. I literally just broke it all. And now people coming into the space, they think cold storage is difficult. They think the UX is difficult, but we've made massive improvements since then. And the key is to continue that momentum.
Yeah. It's easy for people to forget how hard it was. And this is not just some simple software, right? That you go and you improve. You also have to improve, the understanding of economics. You have to improve, as Mo brought up, the trust. You have to improve, how the on and off ramps work, because they still have to interface with the original financial world, right? I mean, this is not bit instant, right? People don't want to go to jail and spend some time with Charlie. So it is complicated, and it was a lot of hurdles to get us to where we are, where you have the experience a Cash App or ShakePay or one of these sort of one button buy, right? That ideally won't run away with the money. It's hard to imagine that they will run away with the money, but still, there is trust. Stephen, what do you think of this dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I noticed you kind of mentioned that Bitcoin's outperforming all the other cryptocurrencies, which is true. And so it's when you talk about Bitcoin UX, it's not a finite thing. It's not it's either good or bad. It's kind of as compared to what? So, if you were to say compare the UX of Bitcoin to aping into some shitcoin DeFi pool that you found on some website, yeah, it might actually be Bitcoin by comparison would be an incredibly simple and easy to understand user experience. If you were to compare it to holding cash in your hands, then you might say, okay, well, it's actually a really, really complicated user experience. If you were to compare it to, using Venmo or something, you might say, well, it's a pretty similar user experience, and that they're both apps that I use on my phone, but one of these seems to settle quicker than the other one. So I think it's all, it's a little bit, it's kind of compared to what. But I mean, yeah, I agree with Matt's point that, we've come a ton, come really far in just, a couple of years here. Big things that jump out at me, though, are just that it's not just, I like to think about the user experience just beyond just how pretty is the user interface, because there's some kind of core technological differences that make things different. You got on-chain and waiting for 6 confirmations. You have, Lightning and kind of needing the always online nature of a Lightning node. So there's these kind of, and then you've got the whole privacy complication with Bitcoin. So I think that there's also, it's not just about user interface in my book, but there's actual some core ways in which the technology differs that, doesn't always meet people's expectations when they're coming into it brand new.
Yep. And then there's also, some realizations that maybe some things just can't be fixed. And we don't know what those are, but, the the nature of Lightning is that it needs to be online. That's a problem for UX, right? I mean, if you want to have funds secured or a wallet that's not connected to something, and if you don't want to learn what a UTXO is in Bitcoin, you could have troubles later.
And at the core, I mean, this is a movement that requires personal responsibility.
That's right.
And our society has been completely groomed into having their handhold for everything. So when we're talking about what, UX wise, like what we're kind of competing against is we're competing against complete walled gardens that don't require any personal responsibility to a degree. And I think the goal has to be not to make it'll never be foolproof. I think it's almost a strict limitation that whatever is built will never be foolproof because it will always require the end user to have some level of responsibility. But the key is for the UX to basically guide the user in the most, responsible, convenient way possible without too much overhead on their side, reducing that overhead.
Well, isn't SBF Sam gonna get us FDIC insurance on all your private keys? Anyway, so Pedro, do you wanna weigh in on this? Listen, I'm gonna try to sort of like not have everybody give an opinion on everything, but to me, one of the most important discussions or a place that I feel like every Bitcoiner needs to reflect on is this dynamic of like, like where is good enough? Have we gone far enough? Can we fix everything or not? Right? Like because it is self-responsibility at the end, right? Like, so Pedro, what do you think?
I think it's really interesting. It's a really nice day to ask that question because everybody's recently been celebrating the white paper release, which in a way was all the UI some people needed, and it was already perfect. And
that's true.
As more people come into Bitcoin, there's always going to be like everybody was mentioning, but also what Matt was just saying, people that just don't want the responsibility and they will not like Bitcoin's UX until it mimics the UX they already use. And because they don't understand that it's the underlying network that we're trying to interface with, it's not just any network. They don't understand that there's a little bit of a trade-off. And I don't think people realize that in terms of censorship-resistant money networks, UX-wise, Bitcoin is like ahead of its time. And people complain it's not yet there yet. But I mean, there's always work to do, and we can always either abstract or visualize things a little bit better so we ourselves can understand it and guide the user through this very novel way of interacting with money and information.
I mean, one could almost say that anytime that there is a guarantee in that UX, that guarantee is being provided by a third party, which you are essentially trusting for the guarantee, because Bitcoin itself has no guarantees, right? You have your sort of belief or your capability of running the numbers or checking the code yourself and sort of like having a belief that would still be there tomorrow. But if you are essentially getting a guarantee, it's a third party that's offering that to you as a service, and they'll come with a cost. That cost may be extra risk or actual, insurance.
Yeah, and I think the same thing can be said about designers. Designers, I think, or whoever builds the interface, they are in a way the third party too, beyond the engineer that maybe established the code that the UI is connecting to. But it's a great opportunity for everybody that deals with images and information to actually take over the information money in the era of the information. Designers, in a way, digital designers and the designers of the physical objects are the gatekeepers, almost.
For every layer of abstraction you have, right, on the network itself, you have another layer that you're trusting, right? So in a way, you're trusting that the UI is interacting with the code that talks to the protocol as well. So it is one more place that things could go wrong. And that's not something you can get away with it, right? Like there's no replacing that specific trust on that layer of UX, of UI, right? Unless you can code. But then if you can code, you can probably screw yourself too, because if you don't have other people looking at your code, you could definitely just screw yourself. I mean, that's how most people lost Bitcoin in the early days. It's like, oh, I coded this wallet. Oh, oops, bug, money gone. The proof of burn that we had internally at our company in the early days was rapid and furious. So I think we all sort of like in a similar page on like how this dynamic works, which is just fantastic. What are some of the things that we can do to bring the noobs on board, like to bring a pre-coiner, screw the no-coiners. That's, these are lost souls. They'll come later and pay a lot more. But the pre-coiner is really somebody that I'm interested on because, there's still like, there's a good sort of like open mind there for what we have for them. So like, why don't each of you sort of like give me like, say 2-3 points of like, what are like immediate things today that are doable that somebody would pay for to be done so that we can help these pre-coiners come into Bitcoin. I'll just call the names. It's easier. I don't know which order everybody is for everybody else. So Mo.
I'm always one to ask about definitions so that I make sure I understand correctly. But what is your definition of a pre-coiner?
So a no-coiner is, Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff is a no-coiner. He has been consistently having fun staying poor since the very, very early days of Bitcoin. If he had bought Bitcoin, which he probably has, but he has gold bags to unload, he would have publicly have made a lot of money and he would not have been, having his banking issues. So essentially, a no-coiner is somebody who refuses to accept that Bitcoin has a place,
okay,
right? Or that is something that exists. They say no to coins. And then you have a coiner, right? I mean, there's people who do have the coins. And then you have a pre-coiner. Pre-coiner is somebody who, maybe heard about it, maybe haven't heard about it, but like they are open to be sold Bitcoin the same way, most people are outside of US are pre-USD coiners. They will probably gladly take it or they won't take it because of other reasons, because they can't take it or whatever, because, USD is essentially the best shitcoin.
Yeah.
So essentially, I'm just sort of like trying to get the people who are either receptible or could be receptible if we have the correct, and let's talk about UX, UI terms, not like sale, right? Like we're not trying to convince them about the economics of Bitcoin. Say they already have some capacity of understanding that part. They are either one button away on Cash App of buying it, or on a meetup, they're going to give that cash and take custody, or in the people who are open to
Got
it.
you. I love that question because essentially you're asking about more adoption from the people who are not quite there yet, but are open to it. And yeah, I think, coming back to what Stephen said is familiarity. The users, the pre-coiner is going to be used to the financial applications which they use, the everyday banking financial applications which they use every single day. What I've noticed at least is there is a lot of familiarity in what users are looking for in interfaces. By the time someone lands on wallet X, they've already downloaded 2 or 3 other wallets. They've onboarded themselves. So they're really looking for things that are more familiar. And I think an interesting question, an interesting thing that we can do is we can maybe try to learn from these traditional financial applications, which these pre-coiners are already really familiar with, and try to learn from them in terms of, there's no direct translation, but really try to learn from them and try to maybe bring a little bit of that into the interfaces of these Bitcoin applications. And another thing is the onboarding process, in my opinion, at least from what I've seen in the wallets, is the make or break for a lot of these applications. And
are these the app wallets or sort of like the more advanced like hardware wallets? Which kind of client are we talking about?
So specifically with Lightning wallets, because my work is primarily with Lightning wallets. I do most of my research on open source Lightning wallets. And the onboarding process is really important because when the user is going through all of those steps, if there's anything that's making them feel uncomfortable or if they're not getting sufficient feedback. And when I refer to feedback is I've copied the address. Is the interface giving me feedback that I've actually copied the address? Is there a sign that's popping up on my screen that I've copied the address? Sufficient error messages, sufficient indication of how long is this onboarding process going to take. If there are if the trust is built in those initial steps, people will keep on going with you. They'll trust you. They'll keep on going with the process.
Is there any data on the drop-off of the first-time UX?
Not that I know of, but it would be great to know that. Yeah, that would be really great.
I'm just curious because I started using Moon Wallet, right? I like to call it Mun because it's 2 U's. But I love Dario. And it is a fantastically more interesting experience, not for a Bitcoiner. For a Bitcoiner, it's actually horrific because you press between Lightning and Bitcoin and it gets confusing. And, I am too old in this space now to fully embrace Lightning in the way that the new people that are coming in are. And I understand that. And then there's the LN URLs that how do I import these so I can take the money from the other wallet? Is it a push or pull? It is so confusing. Lightning is so Bitcoin is simple, right? I mean, here's an address. You send money to the address. I know the nuances of backing up and all this stuff sort of could complicate, but the very basic experience of Bitcoin is simple. Address, send money, confirmation, money mine, right? With Lightning, it's I just never know where I am in that sort of a cycle of the experience. And personally, I struggle to see obvious things that could be done to change that, but maybe you guys have already thought it through in the Bitcoin design group of things that could improve that. I'd be very curious to hear about that.
Or maybe let Steven answer that because he's as far down the rabbit hole as I am. So I'll hand it over to him.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Lightning UX. I mean, it sounds like you're kind of speaking to the QR code differences. You've got your on-chain QR codes. You've got your Bolt 11 QR codes. Then you've got your LN URL QR codes, and sometimes that could be just request an invoice or to actually request a payment. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems there just with the kind of number of QR codes. One thing that's been kind of one of my pet projects is this website bitcoin.review, where we kind of are pushing for using a unified QR code. This is basically, it just uses BIP21. It's kind of the URL scheme, Bitcoin : put your address, you put some parameters. The basic gist of it is that you can use, at least in the way that we're using it, is you could have one QR code, you could put an on-chain address on there, you could put a Lightning invoice in there, and then you just end up with a single QR code, and somebody scans it with their phone, and the phone makes the determination about the best one to use. If it's an on-chain only wallet, it'll obviously go for the on-chain address. If it's a Lightning wallet, it's going to prefer to use the Bolt 11. So that's one potential improvement. And Cash App recently implemented that. And we're kind of documenting on that website which wallets are able to support reading this QR code format. So I'm personally bullish on that just because BIP21 is a standard that's been around for a long time. A lot of wallets already support it. So it seems like it shouldn't be an issue to get that up and running. I think just in terms of the variety of different formats out there for Lightning, I think it's more important for wallets to be able to support reading as many formats as possible rather than support sending to as many formats as possible. So let's say, you've got a Lightning wallet on your phone. I don't think you necessarily need to be a full on LN URL compatible wallet to where your phone suddenly supports, LN URL withdrawal requests from other people. But if you can at least design the app in such a way that it will recognize LN URL QR codes and deliver appropriate messaging to the user,
fails
I think
gracefully.
That's a huge step forward. Yeah, exactly. Fail gracefully. Then I think that's a huge step forward. In terms of Lightning beyond that, I mean, you've got all kinds of complexities with Lightning. You have You've got syncing block filters every single time you open your phone. That is, if you're kind of following this Breeze model where you're actually running like a Lightning node on the phone itself, and it doesn't like depend on this external infrastructure. That's always a huge annoyance because, you expect Lightning to be quick and instant. And, if you haven't opened your phone in several days, you're stuck syncing, or if the phone is off, you may not receive the payment. The payment may fail if the phone is in your pocket. So those are actually some of the bigger problems with Lightning, in my opinion. Just the needing the phone to be online all the time, and what the answer is to that. It's not my place to say what the answer is. I can highlight some of the things.
No, you should have a strong opinion.
Well, I tell you,
everyone in Bitcoin is entitled to have a very strong opinion.
Let me build up to my strong opinion. One opinion is you've got the kind of node on the phone model. Well, and for sure, I'll go ahead and say I think that we should be exploring multiple avenues, just because it's kind of hubris to say like, oh, my thing is going to work. I know 100% certain mine is going to be the solution. So I support people looking at different models to try and fix this. So you have the Breeze model, and also kind of what I would kind of think of as like the LDK model, which is you're going to run this really lightweight node on your phone, and you're trying to come up with ways to optimize it so that, like with LDK, they're doing rapid gossip sync, or they're looking into like async payments now, to where you could have like a Lightning service provider that could like temporarily hold a payment in a non-custodial way for a user. So I think that's super cool. That's a promising solution. It requires a lot of like optimization and getting things to be as lightweight and as fast as possible. So that's one path you could take. Another path you could take is like the kind of Blockstream green light model, where it's like, okay, you're going to have this node up in the cloud somewhere, but the user could use like validating Lightning Signer or some kind of remote key signing thing to where they have the keys on their phone, and it's technically self-custodial because they have the keys on the phone. There's some privacy trade-offs because you're running this node in the cloud and all of that, but that's an interesting model too, worth exploring. That could certainly help a lot of things. The one I'm just personally the most bullish on right now is Fedimint. I think that.
Well, that's Justin's shitcoin.
Yeah, Justin's shitcoin. I'm personally bullish on it just because I think that if you think in a long enough time horizon, you could be like, okay, we want every single human being on the planet to be self-custodial, have their own hardware wallet, all of that. That's cool.
They can't afford Bitcoin on-chain.
They can't afford Bitcoin on-chain.
90% of the world won't be able to afford Bitcoin on-chain.
Yep. And I also start to think about like, okay, we do have to start thinking about what it looks like having some kind of shared custody, because you're going to have children, and you may not want your children having like, you might want to have some control over their funds. You could have an aging family member who isn't, able to, custody their Bitcoin fully. They need financial assistance as they get older. So it's not a cut and dry situation of just like, okay, every human being on the planet is going to be this fully self-sovereign individual. So we have to start thinking about these solutions. And I like the Fedimint model just because I think that you can have Lightning nodes that service a community, and the Lightning node operators can focus on doing what they do best, which is running Lightning nodes really well. And that you then have this framework kind of in place for a community custody. And, you then don't have to worry about the always on nature of Lightning, because you're just running this eCash wallet.
A quick tangent here, because I have opinions about QR codes. And QR codes are idiotic for most interactions that are in person. I still beyond me why people keep on trying to pigeonhole stuff into QR codes when we have NFC for free in every device. NFC is interactive. So, and is high bandwidth. So for all this, if you want to feed the chickens in person with Lightning, like you should be tapping, the machine. And you can have an interaction in which the human is not asked to make decisions on what the human can't interpret a QR code to begin with, but because it's visual, the user gets this impression that he can interpret that QR code, or he has to decide which type of QR code that is for the phone to interact with, right? This is absolutely idiotic and insane. So why aren't like we're trying to do NFC stuff, and like I want to see like this space try to do NFC stuff for in person, because on the computer you shouldn't even be showing a QR code. You're going to have your desktop wallet that's synced with your phone wallet soon enough for Lightning as well. I think Green does that. And then, the computer talks to the browser. Like, why do you have a human looking at QRs on a desktop screen? I am not a computer.
I agree. I mean, we should be looking at NFC more. And that's like, for me, that's kind of one of those things where I defer to the engineers, like in terms of, is it secure enough and all of that? But I think that we should be looking at NFC. And like what would be totally awesome is if, you can think of, and I think they're looking at this at Synonym, or I might be mistaken on that, but they're I thought I heard John or something talking about some kind of like negotiation protocol or something for being able to like, okay, I'm a wallet A and I support all of these different formats. I'm wallet B, I support all of these different formats. And then if you just have this protocol where the two can kind of negotiate between each other, choose the best format for the situation, then you could do that. And then you could do that protocol negotiation over whatever layer you want, whether that's NFC or whatever, however that looks. That could be really cool. And then, all this is just going to happen in like a couple of milliseconds, and the user's not even going to know it's happening. So
yeah, exactly. It's because what people still don't know that's coming is, proper Taproot multi-sig is going to come soon, right? And that's also interactive. So to do those, you're not going to be able to do those transactions over QR. And as we progress on this, we're going to keep on getting further and further away from this idea of trying to scan the screen like it's 1980s, right?
You don't think there's always going to be a place for QR codes?
I see. I love QRs for static. It's a static, non-interactive situation, right? So, for example, I'm walking down the street. I don't want my phone tracked, so I don't want interactive billboards or anything like that. But I like the thing. I want to take a picture. It says like free $10 in Bitcoin to take a picture of this and visit this website. Perfect place for a QR. But I feel like we are incredibly undersold in what technology can do for us with QRs in the whole Bitcoin sort of space. QRs are great for you to do static addresses for air gap stuff. Fantastic. But everything else, I mean, it's just so restrictive and incapable of providing us with the tools we need to give like good UX, right? I mean, it's crazy to think that like with my Amex, I can go and tap it. And now with the phone Amex, I can tap it at the supermarket. My phone is not, I don't have to look at the QR and say, does this one accept Visa or accepts Amex? No, you tap and the thing just does it, right? Especially for lower value stuff, it's just so much better.
But specifically with the credit card tap stuff, I mean, there's the UX issue that when it fails, you don't really kind of know it fails. I've had like different times where
you do.
It's like a jumbling experience.
The machine says, "Oh, sorry, your credit card can't tap this much."
I don't know. I feel like half the time I'm like to the person, I was like, "Did it go through? Like, did you get the thing?"
Well, that's because you live in the US, right? In the US,
and then you just stick the chip in anyway.
Chip and pin took forever to come, and then tapping in the US, it's still early days. But no, I'm
my
with
point
you.
is, it's not a panacea. Like, it's not absolutely perfect, and there needs to be work done at least on like the payment receive side to be more obvious to the user. I think like in the US they use a lot of terminals.
I agree. I mean, like this is never going to be version complete. Yeah,
they use a lot of terminals that weren't necessarily designed for that as the first use case, and then kind of added it on afterwards. But to go back a tiny bit on both your QR code conversation and you bringing up Moon Wallet, the two U's, I think there's something interesting there, which is in this space, what's really cool about this space to me is that anyone can build a Bitcoin wallet without permission. And it's important for Bitcoiners to realize that not every Bitcoin wallet is going to be built for you. And it's important for the builders to realize who is their market, who is their user, and understand what their user needs, and build a wallet for those users. And Moon Wallet is a perfect example there, because there's also a third aspect of building in Bitcoin, which is if your goals involve changing the Bitcoin protocol, you're going to have a really bad time. So with Moon,
not going to happen.
With Moon, Dario and his team, they were Argentinians. They understood what Argentinians on the ground needed today, what they were looking for today, and they made certain trade-off decisions based off of that. And there's a lot of hardcore Bitcoiners that say, oh, it's not a real Lightning wallet. Like everything settles on chain. Like, oh, like why are they not using seed backups? Like passwords and emails, like they shouldn't use that. But at the same time, what the result was a wallet that does not require an hour tutorial video on YouTube to use. You can just download it, and any QR code you scan will pay it. Like you just scan the QR code or you paste the address of the Lightning invoice, the payment will go through. If someone's going to pay with a Lightning wallet or an on-chain wallet, the payment will go through. And the balance is exactly the same. Like it just shows a static balance of the money you have in your wallet. So I think Moon is a perfect example there. And I think the big disconnect is that these wallets aren't built for everyone. They're built for specific niches, and there's going to be many different wallets that take many different approaches.
Let me add a caveat there on the Moon. So there was a bit of a flare up about that on the mailing list, and RBF has been a contentious thing since ever. I am of the opinion that RBF is just a natural behavior of Bitcoin, and it just happens to formalize it. But we don't have to go there. But I was talking to Dario, and I think there was a lot of confusion as to what he was trying to convey on the mailing list, and then it just sort of blew up. But they were already working on resolving the first confirmation issue to not be zero confirmation with their wallet. It's just that's how they got there that fast. So it was coming. It's just now a matter of him sort of fixing it before this change comes to Bitcoin. I don't think it's going to be stopped. So I think it's just a matter of catch up. It's normal for you to make sort of compromises and trade-offs when you want to ship, especially when there is a market for the product. So yeah, it's normal casualty of software in the Bitcoin ecosystem while you're trying to build, and the network is what it is.
So it's interesting that you're talking about the niche of a product, because earlier you're trying to define a pre-coiner, and everybody comes to Bitcoin from their own path. Some people are wanting to save, some people are wanting to transact, some people are wanting to play games. So unfortunately, there's no right answer to help any pre-coiner on board on Bitcoin. It's actually everything, because every Bitcoin is going to be different for everybody. And I think we need to help people onboard into Bitcoin into the right way. But the right way is also going to be their own right way. We don't want them to go into custodial exchanges or lose their keys because of they're using the wrong protocol. So it's kind of like the whole spectrum is wide open. And unfortunately, there's no data collection. So you actually have to take your own initiative and go out and see how the users are using it. It's from your grandmother that maybe is trying to save the last remnants of the retirement, to maybe your nephew that's wanting to trade cards in school for sets. They all are going to need different things, different Lightning wallets, different QR code schemes. Like I love QR codes because it allows me to send Bitcoin to people that don't even ask for it from a picture on YouTube or on Twitter. This would be impossible with NFC, but indeed, I would much rather prefer.
You could have that as just being, the browser connected like to an API on the OS, right? So that the wallet is paying to the browser. You're not taking a picture of the screen.
Yeah, but the price to print a QR code, and because it's already so much ingrained in our collective UX of dealing with the world, especially now after COVID, the QR code is already an icon. It's fair. I mean, NFC too. NFC is going to be used for control too. So don't worry, the populace will be trained on NFCs. But the QR code is just like legacy. It's already here.
I just want to touch off something of what Odell just said. I see a lot of room for opportunity for the Bitcoin applications to niche down, and I think that this is from a strategic perspective is going to be a really, really good strategy, specifically at thinking of a specific persona and developing the interface for that persona. And this is touching a little bit on the UX research side, but really understanding that persona that you're designing that application for. I think that there's so much of room in the wealth of applications that are available at the moment to add in more personality into these applications for that persona that they're developing it for.
I think you're bang on that. The only challenge with that is companies are not going to have enough. The pie is not big enough yet for them to have these niches be profitable enough for them to be able to do it. And if they are on the VC train, unless they're the right VC, they won't have the runaway time for the pie to get big enough for them to have enough user acquisition to produce that for that niche. In a way, I mean, we do have some of that niche already, right? Like when you talk about people who want to really take self-sovereignty and they have a hardware wallet and it's, the source is verifiable and you have your metal plate. This niche became big enough that there's even competition in that niche, right? But that's sort of like a very, in a way, a very broad user experience. It's almost like everybody has a safe at home, people who have enough money and live in a country where they can realistically have a safe at home. But when you're talking about especially third world countries, like the finding that niche and having that niche be profitable enough for a wallet to build for them is going to be very hard. I mean, even Moon with like the size of user base they have, like they still don't have like, a monetization sort of, thing, at least not public plan. And, at the end of the day, somebody has to pay the bills to build the thing for them, right? And as we all know, it's a great pivot here is how do you find money to do UX? Because, contrary to, what people scream on Twitter, there is plenty of money for devs to do Bitcoin development, open source, plenty. I have never heard of a dev that actually has problem finding money as long as there's somebody out there that wants what they want to do. But on the UX side, there's nearly zero money, aside from Spiral and a couple other little entities that sort of like do fund that. And at the end of the day, UX still needs a dev to code that UI or to code that flow, right? To change the application, to provide that, or tweak the protocol, which really, I don't even bring tweaking the protocol because normally that's not going to happen. But generally speaking, you still need that other layer to come in, with funds to make that change. And you also have to convince that UX change is worth their while, right? So I guess like that's sort of like an expansion of that part about being niching out. So do you guys see opportunities that are sort of funded or nearly in the near term fundable to do some of this work?
Sorry to deviate a little bit. I just wanted to touch on what Pedro said as well. Is Pedro made a comment about how we need to really see real users actually using the application interface. And that's something I'm very passionate about because that's the UX research that he's actually referring to. He's referring to usability testing. So actually observing a user actually using the interface. And that's something that we do. We're starting to do a lot more of now in the Bitcoin design community, is actually observing a user using an interface. Do they actually understand everything? Are they asking questions? Are they feeling confident when using the interface? It reveals really a lot of things when you actually see someone using an interface and hear their feedback as they're actually using it. So sorry to deviate there, but yeah.
No, it's great. Contrary to, again, to what people say out loud on Twitter, people love to harp on the hardware wallets are hard to use and blah, blah, blah. But, where are the tickets? We look like we have fairly large like install base for cold cards and like there's very few tickets. I mean, aside from people calling Matt because Matt is the official Uncle Jim for everybody. It is surprising though for the amount of install base, how little tickets there are. And And when they do contact us, like the questions are fairly sort of straightforward. Like I would have had that question. You know what I mean? It's just more of like finding the right doc or whatever. But like people, when it comes to money, people seems to take a little bit more seriously and are willing to sort of like learn a little bit more than just expect things to just sort of happen magically. So yeah, I mean, to your point, I think, just the nature of Bitcoin and money is a private thing is a lot harder for people to allow themselves to be observed using the product. And if a wallet says they observe you and they promise not to, collect data that they don't need, nobody's going to use that wallet.
But I think the user testing doesn't need to happen as a group, as like a Silicon Valley user testing. As every time a niece of mine is there's a birthday, I give them Bitcoin and I use them as a user test, and I experiment with them with different wallets. I see which ones are the ones they use the best, and I'm not always taking notes because I also want to be in the moment and enjoy my family. But you can interact, like if you go out and you try to onboard the vendor, that's an opportunity for deep user tests and establishing a relationship with somebody that will tell you, and you will go through the hurdle of trust because you're there and you go. But I think everything in Bitcoin is very slow, and maybe it touches on the subject you were going to talk about later about funding. People by default are very untrustworthy in Bitcoin, so the physical presence and the work that you do that manifests on the internet is very important to establish that trust, but that trust is very fragile and it takes a long time to build up. And I think once it's there, then the finance kind of reveals itself. But unlike the marketing on the altcoin world that is throwing money at stuff as long as they sneeze, it's immediate. Everything in Bitcoin is kind of on the flip side of that. Always, like the stuff that's happening with Spiral, it's proof of that it started very small and it's growing to such a gigantic size. And from what I've seen, it's well funded. On my side, I've been having some help from the Bitcoin Magazine and the BTC Inc. Team, because we've established that trust, and it's kind of almost like a sponsorship program too. But everything takes time, and nobody's going to throw money until there's a little bit of proof of work.
It's funny you bring that up. The design space, UX space, UI space, there's not a lot of people that come from the software, sort of from like the open source in that space. The majority of the people come from the commercial space. So like, from agencies, from, so people are sort of like still in that mercenary mentality. Like, oh, you want me to work on Bitcoin UI? Well, where's my pay?
Pay me up front. It's the upfront.
If you want to get paid in Bitcoin, build a product and sell it. Like, nobody is going to, like, it's very rare you're going to find somebody that's just willing to just give you money just because they want the app to be a little nicer, right? And also the confusion from the other side, thinking that UX is just a pretty UI, right? But the gap in UI and UX with open source software is huge because, at the end of the day, the software can exist without the UI and the UX, but the UI and UX cannot exist without the software, right? So there is a pecking order there. And I think a lot of people have a challenge sort of understanding and finding ways to sort of navigate and work around that. I almost feel like, we have to create a program where a dev adopts a designer and I joke about this, but we have a mantra inside my company where you don't get hired as a dev if you can't build the whole banana. You have to be able to build something. It doesn't matter if the parts you're not an expert hired on, you don't have to deliver on those perfectly. But if you're a dev and you can't ship the thing by yourself from like zero to everything, even if the other parts are still crappy, but at least shippable, like you can't work for us, because like you're going to need to be able to interact with somebody who can give you all the feedback needed on that UI. And I find that a lot of the brilliant people in open source, especially on the software side, they're just simply incapable of interacting with the UX people. And this divide simply doesn't, this gap doesn't bridge. Do you guys have like some sort of like happy stories of things that we can sort of draw on for other people to maybe that are listening, maybe take on as like, oh yeah, maybe I'm going to try that as a way of either dealing with designers, dealing with UX people, or the opposite as well?
Can I just ask something related to that? Do you think that any interesting new project needs to come from an engineer?
I think it would be presumptions to think that there is a chance that project ships without an engineer. This is the problem. It's like I would love. There's many ideas that I have that like like I wish like you'd find somebody that has the time to code it, because I don't. And it's not going to exist. I mean, it's going to be a cool picture, a cool graphic somewhere.
But does it need to start from an engineer?
No, of course not. Yeah. An engineer shouldn't like start half the thing they start.
It's the thing they say about like science fiction. The science fiction is becoming boring because everything that was, used to be science fiction is now becoming reality. We've got AIs that we can talk to in our wristwatch and all this kind of stuff now. And, it's like 30 years ago would have been 10 years ago would have been science fiction even. So there's this idea that like creativity kind of, science fiction authors kind of paint this vision of what the future can be. And, it takes the engineers some time to catch up with that, but it inspires them and then they do it. And so similarly, I think you can start from like a product design space and kind of like, okay, if I could just imagine anything, just the perfect product, the perfect Bitcoin thing, what would it be? Like, set aside physics for a second. How would it work if I could have it work any way I wanted to? And then, the engineers can come in and say, yeah, sorry, that's not how physics works. They're like, okay, well, could we inch towards that? And then, eventually 30 years from now, then we're like, oh, hey, this is like the perfect Bitcoin product. This used to be science fiction, when I was a kid. And now it's just, it just works. I don't know.
Where's my flying car? But the point is, I think what you brought up is absolutely, it's a perfect example of, nowadays, like, I'm a shitty dev, right? So I spend most of my time like, doing product stuff, coming up with like working with ideas and dealing with everything else in the company, right? But so what I think a lot of sort of designers and the people that build the human part of the software miss is that wanting something to exist doesn't really materializes, right? So if you're truly that passionate about like a specific solution or an idea that you really want to see exist, you need to sell. It's a sales job. You need to inspire an engineer, not by just sort of posting on Twitter, look at my very cool thing here, please somebody come and make it, right? No, you're going to have to get an engineer, become best friends, and then sort of like, go shinobi on them and sort of like, like go in their DMs every day and keep on asking them to make it, and see if you can help. And it's a difficult place to be in. Like if you're not funding it yourself and you're not sort of like the boss that hopefully pays and inspires people to do it. But like getting people to work on just on inspiration is not an easy sell.
Yeah,
it does happen, but
yeah. To your point with how to get that relationship, you asked for those happy stories. I still remember that question of yours is, just speaking from personal experience, I entered into this Bitcoin space as a complete non-tech person. I remember the first few calls I jumped on, I was like, are these people speaking another language? I don't understand what they're saying, And I think to bridge that gap between the tech side and the design side, the only thing I would say is stay curious. If you really are genuinely passionate about the space, stay curious. And the only thing that I did was everything I didn't understand, I asked questions. I didn't understand the answer to the question, I asked more questions, and I asked more questions. And eventually, now almost 8 months later, I get on the calls and I actually understand what people are talking about. But it's just stay curious. If you're passionate about a topic, yeah, stay curious.
It's a great point. It's very like when you talk to an engineer, one of the things that will command respect from that engineer is the fact that like you understand what the heck's going on, right? Like you're not just sort of like saying words, hash, database, you go on a call with like, especially like salespeople from another company or whatever, they start saying words. It's just like, can somebody please get me out of here? Like, I'm not interested in you waving the hand. It's like, okay, great. You have this concept thing that you want to make. Like, let me give you some pointers from a technical perspective. And then if you're able to just return feedback based on those it's like sort of like, okay, we're starting to understand each other now. It's like not asking you to write software, but at least have like a decent understanding of what's going on is a big deal, right? I guess like it's the same way that you'd love if an engineer like, have some sense of UX or some sense of, I guess like you just made me realize that like that's probably part of why we want people to make a good banana, is because we want them to sort of understand like how like the UX works, how the UI works. I'm not asking you to make a good one. I'm just asking you to understand that there is that human component to the software.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, you're going to be more successful as a designer working not just in Bitcoin, but probably just in tech in general, if you actually take the time to try and be curious and to learn about stuff. And likewise with the engineer, you'll be more successful with the designer if you try to learn more about, their world. So I think, I mean, that's kind of like, yeah, getting by as a human. It's just like, I think good, skills to have to always be trying to learn more about the people you're working with and what they have to deal with. And I think just some good, like more like practical, actionable advice for like trying to be a designer working in open source is that, like you have to remember in open source that, budget and time is limited. Time is always limited. I mean, budget and time are limited even at a company. You could follow the kind of like, Ghost or Red Hat model or something like that, where you have an open source project that's kind of nurtured by a company that offers it as a service. And you have more budget and more time probably if you work for a company like that. But, even so, it's going to be limited. And if you're just dealing with a small project that's like 3 or 4 contributors working on it, you've got even less time and less money to work with. So I think just in terms of how you approach that as a designer is, it's not always a good idea to go in there being like, hey, I've redesigned your entire app for you, or I've like redesigned,
That's what people get in open source. It's like, look at this beautiful 50-page PDF. Yeah. I just redesigned everything for you. Now make it.
Yeah. And so like the way I think to get involved is to be more like, okay, let's, instead of trying to rebuild the entire thing, let's try and solve a specific problem. So maybe like, let's say I was a designer and like you said that Moon didn't work for you, that the QR code thing confused you. I'm not trying to pick on them, I'm just using this as an example. So
they are the best experience in this space so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're one of my favorites too. But yeah, so like let's say just to use as an example real quick, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go and like redesign every single screen of Moon and tell them that, hey, I've done it better. I know more than you do about your product. You should redesign it to look the way I did. Check out my cool 200 screen Figma file. What I'm going to do is be like, hey, love your product. There's, I think that there's some issues though with the QR code. I've had, I get confused by it sometimes. So my friends have got confused by it. What if we switch to this, single QR code model? And then I go open an issue and I do a single mock-up of just that screen. And then they come back and they say, okay, well, yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I don't really like that. It doesn't really work for, X, Y, Z reasons. So then I might come back as a designer and say, okay, well, that didn't work. What if we tried designing it to look like this instead? And so what we're doing is we're going back and forth and we're just collaborating on this very narrowly focused issue. And If we can do that, we build up a collaborative relationship. We start to learn more about each other. They start to learn where I'm coming from as a UX designer. I start to learn more about, the tech stack that they're working with, what problems they're trying to solve. And so then you can build up that relationship just by focusing on shipping a solution to a narrowly defined problem. And then, maybe get involved with the project. And then we uncover some other issue users are having. And then we go through that same problem on that narrowly focused problem. Then once you've built up that working relationship and once you have a better, understanding of each other, then maybe you could try the 200 screen Figma file some other day. But I think just getting involved and just trying to find clearly achievable, clearly definable problems to solve as a designer is a better way of getting involved than just trying to burn it all to the ground and rebuild it.
Yeah. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating relationship trust with somebody who's doing a lot of the legwork for you for something that you want. And I think in that, you end up learning with something that engineers truly appreciate, which is the person who's making the request understanding that request version A, takes me a second. Of course, I'll go make that change if I like it. And then request that looks just tiny bit different to you. Oh my God, that's a month of work, right? And what's fascinating in that is you just having that sensibility and understanding the stack and understanding the time cost of that change implies respect. And then when you do want to collaborate more on bigger things, they understand that you're mindful and you picked things to be changed in a certain order, in a certain way that will cause the least amount of code changes, right? Because again, people have other things to do. I think this is it's a super important part of the relationship that I think gets lost outside of companies in open source, because there's no project manager, there's nobody in the middle sort of trying to sort of create just sort of that grease, right? Try to just grease up the wheels and sort of try to smooth things out without being a middleman. Pedro, you do a lot of work with open source people. What are your opinions on this?
I think you just need to go out there and start working, and it's just exactly like Stefan said. You need to build that trust, and that trust can only be built with consistent, throughout a long period of time. On the other side, the team that's already involved with the project almost needs to miss you if you're not around, and think, oh, this person could really be helpful fixing this because they've already fixed this 50 problems. I've been talking to a lot of people, trying to understand what's keeping them from ditching their fiat career and start just dedicating their professional life into Bitcoin. And they always struggle because they don't know how they can apply their skills onto a project. And I think that's a great barrier. But design is actually the lowest hanging fruit, because like it was said before, you just take a screenshot, you make a couple of adjustments, and the owner of the project will most likely appreciate at least the effort, even if it doesn't get implemented. And if it doesn't get implemented, you just keep trying. And there's nothing stopping you from trying this on all projects all the time, as long as you can pay your bills. And eventually you'll merge with the team seamlessly. But it takes a long time. And because there's so many people trying to scam everybody, even for their attention and their time, the spam, if I wanted to sabotage a GitHub project, I would just spam with tiny requests and stupid comments on a GitHub repo, because that's where people really, that's what people hate, is half-done proposals that are just dumped on their laps, and there's no one really trying to organize it and make it so it's collectible by the other side.
We had to close down code card issues way back because, it was mostly coded by us, and people used the project. It was a very open source license, and then people sort of think that they have ownership over how the direction is going, but they're not doing the code. And it gets very tricky very fast. And GitHub has abhorrent moderation tools on issues. I'd love to open them again because, I don't want to be receiving all the issues over email or over support. And, we have a massive web of trust of people that we like to collaborate with. And we end up collaborating with just them and missing out on like lurkers that may like, oh, wow, like, look at this. Like I have the perfect solution for this and just sort of come into the issue, right?
So that's why Coldcard has no issues. There's nowhere to post them.
No, nowhere to post them because it became completely unusable, right? And at the end of the day, I mean, it's a very selfish endeavor in terms of UX. We build it for ourselves. So, we're like a user base of 2, and we hope that everybody else likes it too. But, we have, because we've been in this space for many years, like we have a very wide sort of a web of trust of people who do give us a lot of feedback and work with us trying to make things better, right? But we do lose out on some of this stuff. I really wish we could reopen, and I wish one day GitHub would have proper moderation for issues. But yeah, just anecdotally, it does happen. Which interactions you had, Pedro, that were sort of like you found the right tone to post that screenshot with the logo moved to the left, joking, but like, you changed something and you were able to get buy-in. How was that interaction successful? Like, what do you think was the driver for the interaction?
I think it was because I was coming from the side of a user and not the designer. As I've already tried to make so many suggestions for changes in design that's completely failed because I was very centered in my role as a design and not as a user. So when I was able to transpire that I'm just coming to you as a user with a proposed design, it's because I actually feel the pain of not having this implemented this way, either because the aesthetics just hurt my eyes or because I cannot find the button when I need it and I use this button often. As long as you can explain that, and if it's for real, I think those are the best. If you're just trying to gain some reputation for the sake of reputation, unsolicited designs always fell a little bit to nowhere.
Yeah, it's a lot more genuine, right? I mean, I think anybody who makes software will appreciate the user saying, hey, it's broken here. I can't send the money. You didn't put the send button. Like people will appreciate that honest and realistic feedback. We have a great beta tester that's very well known in the space. He's also a constant guest on this podcast. So like Matt will often slide into DMs and things and say, hey, I'd love to do this. I do maybe less, like more back in the day, not as much these days. He's too busy in podcasts, but Matt, like what were some of those experiences you had sort of giving feedback to project maintainers and getting buy-in from them?
I mean, it just goes back to what I was saying earlier, that there's a massive disconnect in general in this space between like the hardcore enthusiasts and the end users, particularly new end users that we see coming into the space today. And a lot of times, I love all the developers and open source contributors we have in this space. I think it's one of the most bullish fundamentals of Bitcoin, period. And I try my best to support them. But a lot of them fall into the hardcore enthusiast camp, and they tend to try and build things for themselves, which is fine. There's definitely a place for that. But ultimately, it comes down to actually using these tools and interacting with the people that use those tools, and then making decisions based off of that. So I just try, and my interactions with builders in the space is very straightforward. First of all, I just try and support them. And then second of all, I try and give them actionable, relatively low lift recommendations that improve their project, rather than, like, it doesn't help anyone if you just give them some extremely difficult reach thing to do. But I think if you're talking to users and the users are saying, I don't understand this backup process, I don't understand how to send a payment, I don't understand what the difference between Lightning and sending is, I don't understand what UTXOs are, I don't understand what fee I'm supposed to choose in a high fee market environment, Like these are very real, obvious pain points that start to come up when you actually talk to users, when you actually use the tools. And also on the other side, I mean, we see a lot of the hardcore enthusiast types, they don't actually spend Bitcoin.
Guilty.
Or they don't spend that much Bitcoin. They put their Bitcoin in cold storage and then they just leave it there. So if your wallet is supposed to be a daily spending and receiving wallet, you should have input from people that are actually spending and receiving daily. I mean, it sounds very obvious, but that's not as obvious in this space sometimes.
And input is one of the key things which Odell has touched on, is that I'm a little bit of an evangelist for the users, from the UX research perspective, is I want to be bringing more and more of the user's perspective forward in the development of these application interfaces. And one of the things that I'm learning whilst working on my grant is how can we bring the feedback of users to the development of the application and to the developers in a way that's really easy to understand. How can we actually do that? But also, more so, how can we do that in a way that doesn't seem like, okay, well, do it this way because I think that this is a bit good way, here you go, I have the solution already. And one of the biggest things that I learned from Christoph, who has been in the Bitcoin design community, and he's amazing. I've learned so much from him, is communication. The soft skill as communication as a UX designer is one of the most important things. With that is one of the biggest things he taught me as well. Show, don't tell. Show the developers what you're talking about. Show them on the screen the design concept you came up with instead of talking about it, because they might not fully be able to grasp the concept of what you're saying. And one of the things that I do from a UX research perspective is when I test the application out on users, I actually quote what the users have said. I quote their feedback, and I match the feedback that the user has said, the quote from the user, to the actual interface screen. So it's just the screenshot and then the user's feedback. And then I ask the developers and the UX designers, how can we solve this problem? And it's then coming from a perspective of you do it like this. It's how can we come up with a solution? And then all the minds come together and everyone can come up with a solution, as opposed to one person just saying, do it like this, do it like that.
Something I've learned is that whenever you want something to be fixed or changed that's coming from the users and you're encountering resistance with the devs, start assigning every ticket that comes related to that issue to the devs. It's like, okay, you know what? It's on you now. Don't want to fix it. Don't find it this way to be the best way to do this. No problem. But you're going to answer every single ticket that comes in related to this problem. And it's fascinating. It only takes a day. And we have a software release. I think like getting that empathy sometimes require you to really bring that pain home to somebody else. And, that gap, that distance is very wide. I think most technical people really fail to see how ignorant about the tech people are. And it's like really, really like, that old joke of like, have you tried plugging in and on again? It has happened many times when we have boomers buy block locks. It's like, just turn it on and off. Did it work now? And like, seriously, it's like 90% of the time, that's the problem. Just bad Wi-Fi that we can't help them with. It's just, people do have that.
I think, can I just say something? I think it's pretty exclusive to Bitcoin also, is that we have gigantic amount of resources giving us feedback all the time. You just need to go on the Twitter spaces, you go on Twitter, you go on podcasts, everybody's complaining about something. And as a designer, you just need to go out and pay attention, take note and suggest something. I feel like it's such a shortcut and a cheat, but whatever, it's there. People will write long texts doing their own research, non-designer people telling you, enumerating all that they think that needs to change. You just need to go read it, see if you understand it or if you agree, take the best parts and suggest something. It's just, it doesn't happen many other places.
I mean, it's not a cheat. It's perfectly sort of like, it's a great thing to do. Go listen to people bitch about your product. You may not agree with some things. You might just have to like be polite and say no, but like, like go have a spaces, like ask me anything about my product, right? Like, and just let people complain to you. I mean, it is amazing how much you get for free. It doesn't mean you're going to do everything that they want, because they may not know what they want. Half the time users don't know what they want, but just getting that feedback is a fantastic thing. So I guess like this is a good time to sort of like bring this other related topic which is like, have simplicity versus complexity. And then the idea of like, at what point you have diminishing returns on meeting technical things. And then there's all the terminology problem, right? So, I find one of the greatest disservice we can do to Bitcoiners is hide everything from them. Because then they will never learn. And then somebody's going to go in their DMs and say, please send me your seed. Oh, yeah, no problem. Here's my seed, right? Because they were never explained that there is a secret, and the secret should never be shown to anyone. And it's not a password. And if it's gone, it can't be reset. So I find that like companies that really are after mass market, like Coinbase and things like that, they are on this like very sort of like horse blinders train of like, just hide everything. Let's just like, make it like one button and it's just done, right? And that's it. Like essentially you now have an ignorant moron holding his life savings, just one DM away from losing everything. It's horrific. And it happens all the time. Most of the time, people will lose their Bitcoin by screwing themselves than by being hacked or anything else, right? So like, of course, different demographics, different target audiences will have different ways of solving this problem. But like, do we still try to force people into learning before they are able to receive that first deposit, for example? Like, where is the threshold of enforcing some knowledge on the user before they can take their responsibility? Because they don't even know that there is responsibility involved in Bitcoin. Steven, you were shaking your head there, so go for it.
I don't know where to start, man. That's some like philosophical stuff. I mean, yeah, I can probably argue both sides of that. I mean, it's like you're dealing with like the scarcest, asset on earth here, and you're just going to like send it to somebody and they don't know what they're doing, and you're going to risk burning it and then make it even more scarce, I guess. Then on the other hand, if you don't make it easy enough, it's like, do we actually get the adoption or the utility out of it that we want? I tend to skew more towards we need to find, ways to make some aspects of it simpler. I mean, I don't know why. This just calls to mind. I remember like Adobe InDesign version 2. I remember getting to hold a box of this software once, graphic design software. And I mean, like, not only did it come on like 20 floppy disks, but it also came with like 3 manuals. Like the box was like this thick. So, I mean, it was like, there was no like, okay, we're just going to guide you through how, being a print designer.
That was 100 times better than Quark Express. But
oh yeah, no, I'm a InDesign maxi. No, none of that Quark. I mean, you kind of had to read the manual to use it. And, nowadays we've drifted into this idea of like, well, we don't want you to have to read the manual. We want the software to be so intuitive, or it's just going to teach you how to do stuff. Look, I'd say I'm a fan of, here's the kind of ease of use that I'm a fan of. Take Signal, for example. I bring up Signal as an example a lot of the time. What Signal does is it makes it so that you no longer have to think like, it used to be, it was like, well, do you want to send a text message, or do you want to, download some software to generate a GPG key, then ask your friend for their public key and like verify the fingerprint and then encrypt it and then put it into an email and then send it. It's like, obviously you're just going to choose to send a text message probably at that point. But then Signal's like, do you want a text message or an encrypted text message? Like they make it so simple. And what they do is they make it so that like you really, I mean, unless there's some option I don't know about, I don't actually think you can get your private key out of Signal. Like they make it so that like you can only extract the private key under like very, very specific circumstances, which is like, I'm going to go through this user flow to transfer it or like link another device, and then I can scan it. then your key material is exposed. But they make it so that like, so if somebody DMs you, it's like, hey, like I want to like be able to send you some money or something, but to do it, you need to send me your Signal seed phrase. Like they don't allow you to do it. They kind of restrict it in such a way. So people who still want to like roll their own GPG keys are still allowed to do that using software on their laptops. You can still do that. But for someone who doesn't know how to do that, you have this application that really kind of restricts what you can do with it, but it's really looking out for your best interests. I like the fact that both of those tools are available for people. And I like the idea that hopefully we can build the sort of Bitcoin wallet equivalent of Signal while still allowing for all these other applications to flourish for the more educated.
So a quick Rodolfo, it's going to sound like Rodolfo Jones, as Marty Jones would say, but it's not. So on the encryption side is actually fascinating because, this is all proven. Like government state actors like have actively interfered in encryption UX, right? So they prevented email clients from having easy UX. So through that active behavior, they have essentially made encryption garbage in terms of UX, right? And even Signal still doxes your phone numbers. You'd have been as easy for them to make a Signal that requires an email instead of a phone number, but God knows, maybe that was the deal the devil they had to make. I don't know. Skype used to be encrypted P2P, but then Microsoft bought them, and then it wasn't anymore encrypted. So there is this larger forces too that prevent good quality like software and so I don't know. I just the encryption example I find fascinating because it is true. I mean, Signal did make so that my butcher is on Signal now. Like seriously, he shows up on my Signal. I'm like, hey Rodolfo, I'm like, what? Like, that was a little weird, but that to me is proof that it has crossed the Overton window there, that you do have now, your butcher on Signal. So nobody can find my meat orders. But I had this complaint about Moon before, which was they were not using seeds, right? BIP39 seeds. And, their answer to that is, we don't want to do that because it's a lot easier if we use this other schema, because then we can store it in the cloud and blah, 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 right? So I'm still unsatisfied with that. It's kind of funny that this Moon became sort of like the topic of this podcast in a big way, probably because they do have some of the best UX in the space. But there is something special about people having a semantic canonical relationship with their secret, right? So it's not like some garble that like they don't know if that's the encrypted version of it or if that's the non-encrypted version of it. There are words. These words are precious. And, if these words don't look like words, it's probably encrypted. So I don't know, like that to me was a step too far. Maybe I'm wrong. And, in their case with their users, it made different sense, especially because it's not an English speaking country where the words were in English, even though we do have a Spanish list. That goes to your sort of comment about like this. So where do you guys sit on like things like today with the options that we have, were sort of like good trade-offs in hiding from the user, full omission of that stuff, and stuff that I think like you guys think like we went too far?
Well, I want to jump in here real quick because Stephen mentioned Signal, which is an example I like to use a lot as well, because I think kind of how builders and how like we should kind of like focus on building projects for end users that actually get adoption and are considered convenient have a lot of similarities to the trade-offs with encryption, which the main one being personal responsibility. And Signal's trade-off balance is a perfect example of where hardcore privacy enthusiasts do not like the trade-offs that Signal made, but it's also the most massively successful encryption project in terms of messaging and chat that we've ever seen. So there's a massive disconnect there.
Perfect honeypot.
I think in the Bitcoin space we're going to see similar. And with Bitcoin, you also have this similarity where it's not just on the actual front end UX side where those trade-offs have to be made depending on what your end user wants. You also have to kind of decide how that back end is going to be set up, how the back of the app is actually functioning in order to enable the kind of UX you want to give users. And so a perfect example here to me is, okay, what do a lot of new users want? A lot of new users want very easy, convenient to use mobile wallet that has low fees and that they load it on their phone and it just works. They don't need like a home node. They don't need a desktop computer. They don't need anything else like that. And then what's a nice to have that the user doesn't realize they need, but they probably should have, is privacy. And so the Fediment project is almost universally degraded by the hardcore Bitcoin enthusiasts because it's technically custodial. It is custodial by design. There's a federated custody, so it's a multi-sig custodial model, but it is custodial by design. But by building it the way they are building it, they are able to get around a lot of the UX hurdles that these other wallets are coping with. And like a perfect example in Lightning world is receiving payments, that's a really big hurdle. Like if you install a self-custody Lightning wallet, it's really hard to start receiving payments. You need inbound liquidity. And so all of a sudden, if you're in that situation as a UX designer, you're going to have to try and educate the user on what inbound liquidity is and how they can achieve that inbound liquidity with minimal friction and minimal cost. So I think Fediment kind of lines up with that signal model very, very interestingly. And it should be cool to watch it hit the market and see how other projects kind of react and other builders and designers kind of react to either the successes or the failures that they have.
One amazing thing that I think he only started about a year and a half ago, that used to happen a lot way back in the day, is people trying different shit. It's like, please, like, don't just go do the same thing with a better sort of look or, better marketing or better UI. Like, literally go build a different set of trade-off, like a different solution, maybe even trying to go after the same user for the same effective utility. But like just seeing people build different things, it is just fresh air. I mean, I was actually concerned for a while because it just looked like every Lightning sort of option and solution was essentially the same shit with different VCs. Now it's like, they're trying different things, and that means some things may not be able to interop, and that's okay. Like we have Bitcoin as the base layer, as the ultimate sort of settlement solution. So you can afford to make more trade-offs and try even further different things. So anyways, that's just my little rant there. Sorry.
No. It was a good point. But, off your other point with regards to the education, that was another really good point that you made, is the education in the onboarding. Okay, very practically speaking, imagine someone downloads a wallet and they're going to a meetup. They want to pay with Lightning straight away at the meetup. Do they want a 5-minute onboarding process? Probably not. And one of the principles in good UX is, don't force the user your way. Don't force them to do what we want them to do. And at the moment, it's such a fine line because we're deciding how much we think of education the users need. And we're including that on the onboarding flow. But at the same time, I think we also underestimate, users are intelligent by nature. So don't underestimate. Yeah, well, I always tend to give the user.
I was shaking my hand. No, I'm just joking. Smart and ignorance are two separate things, right? Like, we're all ignorant about a lot of things. It doesn't mean you're dumb. It just means you're ignorant, right? Like we all start ignorant about everything. Very few people are actually dumb. So like, accepting that ignorance and also accepting that others have ignorance and sort of like working, coping, or sort of fixing it, that's where the dance is, right?
Also, another point is, there's it seems, generally the users are put into two buckets. They're the new user and then they're the advanced user. And actually, I've started to change my perspective around that because a new user is no longer a new user once they've onboarded themselves. That then becomes a user. So the terminology new user is only valid for such a short period of time.
Pre-coiner.
I would build on that and claim that everybody is always a new user to some aspect of Bitcoin. There's such the ladder. Like I've tried to come up with a checklist to try to kind of qualify how much of a Bitcoiner I was with a form on a website, and just go through a list of things that you kind of need to do, from potentially buying your first Bitcoin to like mining a full block by yourself. And everything there, we're all at the stage somewhere. Obviously, Satoshi Nakamoto would be like the perfect God mode.
Actually, no, people used to hate him for a long time. There's a lot of misconceptions about that stuff. Like, he got a lot of stuff wrong. There was a lot of bugs in the software. A lot of people contributed. A lot of people changed stuff.
No. But I'm speaking in terms of the Bitcoiner level, because he was technically the one that mined the one block that no one else can mine. It's not a judgment of character. It's just which steps have you gone through have you used all the products, all the systems? Most likely no. And as soon as you have your first Coinbase wallet or Coinbase Bitcoin or your first Blue wallet, now you're just opening yourself up to another array of infinite problems that you're going to have to fix. You're now an old Blue Wallet user, but now you're about to enter the stage of a new MyNode user, or the stage of a new like Brains mempool user. All those stages are important. That's why I think when we talk about education, there's so many ways of doing education. Memes are education. People going on to villages and talking to people and showing them how Bitcoin works is education. I think personally, to really understand the value of the secret that you're holding when you open a new wallet, because everybody understands the secret, but what does that mean? You actually have to go a little deep into the weeds and the technology. And that's why I'm working on a film that tries to put that front load onboarding on maybe Netflix. So people don't even understand that they're learning about Bitcoin, because once they understand what a hash really means or what a blockchain is for, then everything else, then they will run towards Bitcoin instead of having to be proposed or sold on Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, there is also the fact that I think a lot of Bitcoiners, especially the more intense Bitcoiners, me included, is it's hard to accept that, the majority of the population may not want to be educated, may not want to have responsibility, may not want to do it. I kind of believe that the Pareto distribution is still gonna exist even with the most perfect asset in the planet. Majority of the people are not going to want to take custody of it. They're going to want insurance, and it may not be ignorance. They may just not want to spend the time.
Even though this is probably the most open network and most accessible network, we're actually dealing with the most aggressive and hostile pool of potential users. That just goes back to that scene of the Matrix. A lot of these people will, before they accept Bitcoin, they will fight it because it goes against their belief system. Everything. It actually disrupts their own self-esteem, and it needs to be. That's why all the messages need to be catered to that one specific person, because a generalist message will hurt someone's feelings, and the user will retract and become a non-user, and then you go from pre-coiner to no-coiner.
Bitcoin is an education, right? I mean, I can speak for myself. I was completely ignorant about economics, beyond even the point that I thought I knew about economics, right? So, Bitcoin taught me a basic level of economics. And what's even weirder is that you learn something that mainstream does not agree with. So it's a tricky place to be in if you don't dive in and you're not participating with other peers who do sort of validate this non-orthodoxy of economics, right? I mean, the orthodoxy is you print and things just magically happen in the world. So it's hard to exist in that space. And the software needs to exist in that space too. Most software does not empower you to be the owner of the stuff. right? And in Bitcoin, that wallet is empowering to be the owner of the stuff. So that on itself, if you bring it back to UX, like, it's already going against the orthodoxy of software, right? Most software wants it to belong to them. The data belongs to them, not to yourself.
You touched on a word that really is a word that means a lot to me, and that's the word empower. Because I think that that's if you want to look at that from an almost philosophical perspective, is how do we design more interfaces that empower users, that users actually really feel empowered when they use it, that they give that, it's that aha moment. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. Oh, I'm happy to continue clicking through here. And feels like that's this journey that we're on in the whole UX process of where's that empowerment? How do we actually bring that feeling of empowerment from the design perspective, from the interaction perspective? There's so many different things that connect to that.
I personally feel very empowered when I use applications that allow me to see stuff and not hide. I felt the most empowered when I used Sparrow Wallet, because finally I was being treated as a Bitcoiner and not as a Bank of America Bitcoin curious person. It was, and for instance, now I'm trying to work on a project and trying to hire engineers to work on inspiration. Just something that NVK was just saying that was impossible, but I'll try to challenge that. And it's trying to make the technology of the mechanics of Bitcoin visible to the user as they go through the process, and also touching on this new lexicon and language that we're trying to introduce to Bitcoin that takes it away from the legacy financial systems, because I think that's what's gonna the feeling that I'm chasing from the user is I get it now, or something like that. Something that they understand what exactly signing a message means, not just with a checkbox. I think there's space for that too. But I think even Bitcoiners, a lot of Bitcoiners that I talk to, they're not aware of the mechanics of Bitcoin. And I think that's very dangerous, because I see other Bitcoiners that I really respect enter debates with other people. And even though they understand the economics, they don't understand the technicalities. And technicalities are integral to the economics. There's nothing we can sacrifice. And
Pedro, I don't, it's not that I think it's impossible for people to code from inspiration. It's not that. It's more like, if I have to define a little bit better, is that if you want somebody to do the work for you, just inspiration is going to be a lot harder to sell to them. You actually have to sell to them. Like, you have to get them to work.
The idea is to sell a vision and say, hey, engineer, do you want to be part of this? Potentially it will be something that will create a pattern or a standard, or maybe it will fall through and we'll all be poorer at the end, but at least we're learning and we're connecting with other Bitcoiners. Because like I said, there's a lot of engineers wanting to enter the space. They don't know where to start. There's a lot of project ideas that I think can be initiated by designers that are intimately related to Bitcoin, and just bring in the engineers through those projects.
Well, like Sparrow's an interesting example here because, I mean, Craig Raw completely changed the game when he released Sparrow Wallet on desktop. It is extremely easy to use, extremely powerful, doesn't hide things from the user, has very good design elements. But a key aspect here with Sparrow is that he built it for himself. He had a need. He didn't like Electrum. He needed something that was power user but user friendly. And he built Sparrow. Now, that works. And also on top of that, to go back to our earlier conversation, he also figured out a way to sustainably fund it through collaborative transaction fees. So he actually has sats flow. He makes sats. He's never going to have to take any VC money. He's never going to have to take any grants. He has a sustainable business model that doesn't require KYCing users, surveilling on users, or anything like that. But the key thing to keep in mind here is that works for power users and maybe the step below power users. But that model of an engineer building something for himself tends to fall off for beginners and newcomers and new users, just because by design, an engineer that's talented enough to actually build a project like that from scratch by himself is probably not a newcomer, beginner user type of individual.
I can speak for us. Like, we have like, one product that's like extremely power user friendly because it was made for us. And I don't want any aspect of my Bitcoining to be hidden from me. If anything, I find that to be an attack vector, especially when you're trying to do, larger transactions. But because, there's also hardware limitations on what you can do on the screen of a code card. I mean, it's a tiny little device. We depend on people teaching each other how to use it, right? I mean, we have essentially a network of Unco gyms, right? That like empower the next person to do that, right? The same way your father goes with you to the bank and helps you open a bank account, right? Like a child is not going to just figure that out. Like you need guidance, right? I feel like we're dehumanizing technology by essentially like removing this idea that you could have a Sherpa, right? Like, you can have people that guide you through this experience. This is what's so beautiful about Bitcoin. It's like, Bitcoin doesn't have a community, it just has many communities that use Bitcoin. And each of these communities of people, some are toxic, some are not, some are shitcoin friendly, whatever. Like, they will help each other. Like you see this, like Bitcoin would have not happened if people were not helping each other figure this stuff out, like in meetups and things. So, and this does scale as well. It really does. Parents and grandparents didn't learn how to use email by themselves. And there is no bigger, more install-based technology than email. They had a teenager from the family go and just show them how to do it. Right, to the point that now Gmail essentially just goes pre-installed on things, and the space has evolved to be nearly sort of instant. Bitcoin is only 14, 13 years old now, so it still needs time for things to happen. We're still in the molten days. Cold card still exists, right? Like in 20 years from now, it probably won't exist. Like we're going to have like, Musig in 10 different devices with ephemeral fucking seeds everywhere in space, and, stuff just happens, right? But until then, we need Netscape. We need Internet Explorer. We need modems, right? Modem stores that will show people how to use the modems, right? Like we can't just like completely jump off and ignore this huge space of things sort of still having to be invented. Anyway, sorry for the rant. Who wants to go next?
Well, I was just going to mention that email is a gigantic install base, but we just talked about the fact that email could have been encrypted and now it's not, and now everybody uses Gmail, which is completely like, what is email? It's just a compose button and a send button. People have no idea what's happening with the data once it leaves your hard drive, and because people don't know, they will get in trouble with stuff that they are putting out there, because it's marketed as safe, but it's not, and people don't care. So right now, a lot of users use the internet in 4 different apps, and that's the internet for them. They don't realize that there's a whole world. And I think we also almost need to go back to the basics and go back and study like machine language. And everybody, unfortunately, now that the money is machine money, is a protocol that removes the human factor, we actually need to all be a little bit proficient in reading the code.
Once the hardcore drop off, get bored from things water down, and eventually become captured. That's the story of every single technology that there is, right? Once the hardcore people stop running their own email servers, essentially it died. You cannot run your own email server. Your email will be marked as spam. Like, this is a fact of today. You can't. It's over. That party is done and gone, right? It's kind of fascinating because, like, you see things like, for example, in ham radio, right? There is IP4 stacks fully allocated for ham radio, so you can do ham radio nets and stuff. But like nobody uses, and all the ham radio people are dying because they're all over 70 and 80. So like some of that spectrum might actually get lost. In Europe is already getting lost, right? So, as much as people like to kind of hate on the hardcore people because they want to do things in a certain way, they want to protect that specialness about showing all the stuff, all the hacks, right? We also like to joke internally. It's like, if there is no hacks in the UI, we failed. So like, this is what keeps things from being captured, from being fully watered down, and actually protects users. It has a cost. The cost is, that ultra polish, sort of like commercial, McDonald's kind of version of the UX.
But and I think it's really interesting because it actually touches on aesthetics, not just design. There's the veneer of the fiat aesthetics that gives you a very clean image, and it's the language, the copy, everything is super sleek. There's always a suit communicating it. And in Bitcoin, it's kind of the opposite. And I think we should be onboarding people with super simple experiences, but always pushing them forward to become as hardcore as possible. The end goal should always be hardcore Bitcoiner.
So everybody needs to become toxic at some point. And you know what? Most people do.
Exactly.
There's two paths in Bitcoin, it seems that way. I'm going to generalize now. You either become toxic or you become a shitcoiner. There is no middle ground. That's just the path that people take. New Bitcoiners that are polite and nice, they think that we're all crazy for being toxic, and this toxic environment makes people go away, and give it enough years, they become toxic. I love it. So anyways, I guess like one of maybe the last topics I want to just sort of touch on, it's been almost 2 hours now. I'm happy to keep on going, but I think Matt might need to drop off at some point soon, is terminology. Right? We all have opinions. This is a CEO-less network. Nobody owns the Bitcoin terminology, the Bitcoin UX. Nobody owns anything, right? I mean, and nobody needs permission to change the name of everything. So if I want to call a client, a toilet, I can call it, and it's still going to work as long as it uses the same protocol. So, I started this little site called bitcoinstack.info that has essentially, it's sort of like, because of the Bitcoin wallet is a terrible name for wallets, like absolutely horrible, because a Bitcoin wallet is not a wallet. There is nothing in it, even though it seems that way. And hardware wallets are even worse, because a hardware wallet definitely does not have anything in it, and it does not even know what's going on. So I can't remember where Bitcoin signing device was actually coined. It was kind of murky, or there were many variations. I've said a few of those way back too. So it's lost on me. Maybe Matt has a better memory on this. So anyway, so I kind of wanted to redefine these things a little bit better, so that, and I fail myself because I still want the market to understand what I'm saying. So I still bring up hardware wallet, even though I want everybody to be saying Bitcoin signing device or Bitcoin signer. And wallets are actually clients. The same way you have an email client, you don't have an email wallet or email cabinet. It would be really weird if we all have an email cabinet. So I've been trying to push people into this, and a few wallets have actually changed their terminology on their site. We have changed on our site. It's probably, a hopeless battle, but it's still a fun one to have as a hobby on the side. It's a much more winnable battle than trying to change the Bitcoin denomination or create a SAT symbol that would never exist. It shouldn't.
First of all, we already won. We already won that battle. SATs are the standard. People said it couldn't be done.
Yes, but not a Bitcoin SAT symbol. A SAT symbol should not exist.
Their meters don't have symbols. Why should SATs have symbols? But that's besides the point. I have to drop. I just wanted to thank you all for joining us for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. It was a really good one. And I look forward to listening to whatever your answers are after this. But appreciate you all. Peace.
Thanks for coming, Matt.
Later, Matt.
Best guest ever. We have a running joke, by the way. Matt calls himself a co-host and I call him a guest. And it's been going on for some time now. He's been on every single episode of the show.
You guys are hilarious. But, speaking of what NVK just said, that the terminology discussion around external signer and hardware wallets, that one really blew my mind. I'm speaking now from a completely non-tech person. I was, having a discussion with someone about, I'm going to buy a hardware wallet. And then that person used the word external signer simultaneously in that chat conversation. And I said, what are you talking about? Oh, well, that's the same thing. What? you know, it's it seems that these words are used interchangeably, and the people who have been using them interchangeably over the years expect everyone else to kind of know that. It's not the case. It's absolutely not the case. So the terminology is a really big one. And in part of the UX research that I'm doing, I'm noticing that, words for past, some wallets are using passphrase, some wallets are using secret phrase.
Oh, I mean, I've tweeted explanations about technical explanations of how passphrases are not passphrases. They're just seed extensions. It was a terrible name to start with. Some people call it the 25th word, but really it could be 10 more words. It's a failure of early engineering being the definition of the terminology, right? But I think it's important for us to not fully give up and still try to change things. But at the same time, you have to sort of accept that this is a voluntary system, and people at projects will still call things whatever they want. And maybe they're more successful than you, so they're going to end up defining the space. But the Bitcoin signing device, it was a big pet peeve of mine because I make hardware wallets, and I have now the tap signer card, which is even slightly different than like a normal hardware wallet, right? It's just like essentially a seed digest sign. It's just a digest signer, right? So if you put anything to it, you'll sign. And I was having a very hard time explaining this even to technical people, right? Because again, when people say the word hardware wallet, they have this expectation of a thing, right? That has the little screen and the buttons and it works in a certain way. And most Bitcoiners don't even know how this stuff works for real. Like the actual stuff, a lot of people don't understand that there is no coins in the device. You're just providing a signature proof that you move these coins or that you own the rights to change the ownership of those coins, right? To move in the ledger. And the wallet doesn't have it either, but the wallet, what we call wallet, which is really a client, all it does is it has access to the chain to know the state of those coins, those UTXOs, in order for you to generate signatures of your signing device, right? So creating this stack, I was trying to sort of like come up with terminology for this. So, you have the node, you have the client, and you have the signer. And these verbs and just things sort of like provide the proper sort of usage, in my view, of like what's actually happening, and is confusing people less. But it is hard, right? Because we have, over 10 years now of defined terms and a lot of prior knowledge and a lot of education out there that still has old terms. So the Lindy on this old terms is very strong. So how do you change going forward is still a puzzle to me. I'm still like going to die hard on this, but I'm also very realistic about like, we may not be able to change it. How do you guys feel about this? Like in terms of like terms and things that we could change, things that we managed to change? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel for better nomenclature?
I personally find the term Bitcoin signer to be very confusing because when I hear the word sign, I've always associated that with signing my name. But in truth, there's no signature happening at all. We're really talking about a cryptographic function here that's, being given some kind of input and being given some kind of output. So how am I don't know. I get confused every time.
But at least signature in cryptography has, like...
I'm giving you a hard time.
Yeah, it has let's call it 50 years of like a very expected sort of name for something, right? It's kind of like aspirin is not aspirin.
Yeah.
It's a bark. But this is very fair. At the end of the day, things can be called whatever you want. I mean, like humans are still free to call things whatever they want.
That's what I mean. I'm just curious if there was someone, like back in the day who was like, someone in like the early 80s or someone who's like, or even before that, we're talking like, early encryption days, World War II. And like, there's someone who's like, oh no, this isn't a signature. This is like a proof or something like that. You can't go around calling it a signature. People are going to confuse it with a handwritten signature.
And then, I bet a mathematician went to him and said, well, but a proof is a very different thing in mathematics. Yeah, sure. It gets very dicey very fast, especially when there is like a lot of people from different fields arguing with each other.
Yeah. I mean, this is messy, and I don't know if there's a light. The only light at the end of the tunnel I can see is that, like, I don't think this is a Bitcoin problem or a computer problem or just a general technology problem. I think that this is something that's very, very ingrained in the human experience. Like, I'm not a big Bible quoter, but I will pull up one thing I do remember from the Bible is this idea that, okay, the humans tried to build the Tower of Babel to reach God, and God's like, no, not cool. And then there's like, puts this curse upon humanity that, one man says gift, and then the other man hears poison or whatever. There's this idea that language is this kind of imprecise thing. It's so ingrained in the human experience that you see it referenced even as far back as the Bible. So,
but that's true even for engineering, right? I mean, when you look, there is one of my favorite XKCD cartoons is the one about standards.
Love it.
Right?
Love it.
So, you have like a guy like, oh, this is not great. This is not great. Well, we should create a new standard then. It's like defining something that sort of like impacts many different people. It's a hard problem, and it's unsolvable, but I still feel like we are early enough, and maybe the market will inform these things, right? Like a lot of times the market will come up with terms like hashtags. Hashtags didn't exist on Twitter, right? I mean, they were invented by the users who started just adding a hash on a term, on a label. And maybe as more people from different sort of cultures and languages and places in the world start to use Bitcoin with each other, they'll have to find common language, right? So they may find terms that cross the language barrier because they are not interactive with a person that speaks their language. So maybe that's how things play out. But I still think signing device is the correct term, and anybody who disagrees with me should just hang up now.
I think I'll go ahead and say, I'll say real quick. I do personally, even though I'm giving you a hard time, I do personally wish we would call hardware wallets signers. I still agree with the term wallet for like an app, but I personally like signer for hardware wallets.
No, I don't. I was joking. Like don't
hang up.
I'm perfectly used to arguing about this one. The next one will be client, because I still want people to understand that the stuff is not in the thing, and you have just a client that talks to the chain. It talks to the common protocol, right? And Bitcoin Core from the very early days, which used to be just called Bitcoin, they were going to separate the wallet from the node part. The node, like those two kind of don't belong together, but, it's very hard. I think there's still an effort to try to separate. So back when, I think it was Gavin who coined it, like Core. So it's going to be Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Wallet. So they would be separated because it was already causing confusion between people who were very knowledgeable about what was going on. So that's a little piece of history there.
And off that terminology question that you brought up, is the terminology would need to reach a place where when a user looks at a particular word on an interface, they're not having to think about what does that mean. Because when they're having to think about what does that mean, then it's already not in the right, area of language. And another thing is that the accessibility, we have to also bear in mind that not everyone is a native English speaker. And if we as native English speakers are developing these apps and these interfaces and using terminology that for us might seem familiar and easy to understand, to make Bitcoin applications more accessible, we need to be going out into the field. Like we need to be going out into all the different countries, the non-native English speakers. They need to be testing the apps and letting us know if they understand what's being said. And then we can really start to, get this more humanized language.
It's kind of fascinating because the language of science way, 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 way back was Latin, right? Well, first Arabic and then sort of like Latin. And I'm talking about science that was sort of like cooperated between different cultures, right? So cross language thing. And then, modern times, you have like German. Well, I think it was French first, and then German. You had to know German in order to properly do science back in the 1920s kind of thing. So, maybe the market showed that like English won, right? I mean, I had to learn English. And I think that maybe this is accelerating now with like how sort of countries are so connected. And maybe, we're kind of stuck with English now for the next sort of like 50 years as like what people are going to have a sort of like some basic understanding of it. Not everything can be picture graphed, right? Like you look at, for example, seed phrases, seed words. BIP39 has multiple language lists, right? But those things map to bytes. And that's an absolute nightmare for a developer that, wants to make the thing easier to use. So he doesn't want to ask which language you're picking the words from. And in what language do you ask the question about which language you're using the words from? And you're going to have issues with translation of those words into private keys that then like people can't find their money. We see this with people who use special characters in passphrases, right? They will use special characters in their language on a passphrase that most software does not support. Most software will support a Hindi sort of UI, but it won't support a Hindi input tab phrase, that passphrase, right? So where's my money? There's no software aside from that one wallet that supported it, right?
I think there's an amazing opportunity to actually reinvent the whole language that's being used in Bitcoin. I think when the clients were made and the previous designs were made and everybody was developing this, it was very much still in flux. Nowadays, the language that was adopted first is already being co-opted. The idea of wallet has already been absorbed by the competition, and it's already being used to create the absolute wrong idea of what Bitcoin should be. So I think if we go back to the actions that are actually happening in Bitcoin, I think signature I think it's a great word because it actually is the signature. That's at least how I learned how cryptography works. There's a signature. That's the function that you're running. Yes, we're just running a function and it's mathematics, but it actually is called the signature function. And we're actually signing a message that's actually just going to unlock UTXOs. So we're not even sending Bitcoin. We're just authenticating information. So if we ever enter the regulatory capture environment that will ultimately arrive at Bitcoin, if it hasn't already arrived, we need to have the language straight so they actually prohibit us from authenticating messages and not prohibit us from sending Bitcoin, because sending Bitcoin is not necessarily what we're doing. And it's very easy to manipulate the masses to understand Bitcoin, sending Bitcoin as a bad action because of whatever environment or blackmail and money laundering. But authenticating messages, those are a little harder to convince that it's actually something bad. So if we go back to the primitives, like for instance, even like consulting the blockchain or consulting the network, consulting if let's say an application. I'm working on a proposal for a bunch of different UX things, and I'm calling the project set signer because you're basically just signing for sets, and it's also derivative from the seed signer, which is a little bit more detached. And the tagline of that application is UTXO management and message signer, because those are the two primary things that application is doing, and it's actually what's happening in the Bitcoin protocol. Now, obviously, this is for someone that's already very committed and wanting to fight back on the language front. Somebody that's just wanting to send Bitcoin between friends, maybe they need the version that actually just has 5 buttons. But absolutely, I think there needs to be a discussion about language, because we already see the language coming into law.
I think the language discussion could be a whole podcast episode on its own, to be honest.
That's
Not
right.
even kidding.
We're going to do the Bitcoin review semantics episode. No, I mean, like language is how everything works, right? That's how you think. That's how you communicate. It gets tricky.
In fiat, that's the weapon. So we can't neglect it, because Bitcoin has code and it has data. Fiat has language. That's all they have. And if we let them define the language, then we'll lose the battle.
There is some good hope there, because even so, the way that the legal system works is more like if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck kind of thing. So, when you do enter into a legal concern, a legal matter with a thing, like it doesn't matter if Bitcoin is transferred, like there is like good common law sort of like precedents of like, oh, you had an issue transferring property from this person to another, right? Like it doesn't matter if you use the train for gold, if you used email with like your PayPal credits, or if you use the blockchain to sort of like show that the ownership of the UTXO is now owned by somebody else, right? So like I think like politicians can use that to sandbag Bitcoin, to sort of like try, and they have tried, to sort of like show how things, like for example, we don't use the term mixing anymore with collaborative transactions. It's important that we use better terms ourselves so that we don't sound like criminals. But I'm not like, in terms of like actual sort of, we have a lot of protections within sort of like a legal framework around this stuff. Listen, guys, I really appreciate this conversation. This was phenomenal. I really thank you for spending, 2 hours plus, discussing the topic. I feel like this is a topic that's not, I guess, discussed enough, or at least not in a way that I feel like it resolves things or finds new problems. I feel like it was very constructive conversation. So maybe do you guys want to sort of say some final words and maybe like, sort of tell people like things you need or selling or where to find you? There's no shame. Seriously. It's like, whatever is the thing you do, by all means, get the word out. So Stephen, any final words?
Oh yeah. So thanks for having me. This has actually been this has been an interesting conversation. If you're a designer interested in working on Bitcoin, or, product designer, creative, UI, front-end dev, or just interested to learn more, just check us out at bitcoin.design. There's instructions there. You can get on our Slack channel and just lurk for a little bit. And if you're ever passing through Atlanta, make sure to look for meetup.com for an Atlanta BitDevs meetup. If you need a place to set up your laptop and get a cup of coffee and network with other Bitcoin entrepreneurs, just hit me up, Terminus. We've got a space for you here. So yeah, that's all. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks. Pedro.
It was great to talk about designing Bitcoin. Thank you so much for having us. If anybody listening is interested in working on anything that's giving shape to Bitcoin and helping explore and share that knowledge with other people, I have this project called SetSigner that I'm trying to jumpstart with other engineers and other designers, where we can experiment ways of visualizing the interactions with Bitcoin. And also this other project called Anatomy of Bitcoin, where it's trying to go and to the bottom of the pre-coiners and trying to create a narrative to kind of inspire and explain Bitcoin and give it a tangible, even though it's all 3D, something tangible and a visual that people can understand the protocol.
Where can people find those projects?
setsigner.com and anatomyofbitcoin.com, or on Twitter. Twitter is the best.
Mo, final words?
Those final words are so heavily laden, right? No, I'm just kidding. Just a final sign off is kind of stay curious. If you have enough passion for the space, stay curious, I think is really important. And let's continue building applications and interfaces together that make people feel empowered. You can find me in the Bitcoin design community. Please feel free to join our Slack channel as well. We're a very friendly bunch, and we'd love to have you there. That's it.
Thank you for coming. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate that there is people trying to make the Bitcoin UX better. It is a bit of a thankless job because, you still need to get buy-in from engineers and you still have to fight the users. So it's like, it's a hard space to be in. So I really appreciate people putting in the effort. You guys have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks.
You too. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to get in touch on Twitter at Bitcoin Review HQ or the Telegram Bitcoin Review Pod or email bitcoinreview@coinkite.com. Remember, I don't have a crystal ball, so if you have a cool project you're working on, do make sure to get in touch with us. And if you're still not bored, you can follow me on Twitter at NVK.